Blessed are the eyes that see what you see. For I tell you, many kings and prophets have desired to see what you see, and have not seen it. To hear what you hear, and have not heard it. I thank you, Father, for hiding these things from the learned and the wise, and revealing them to the innocent and the simple.
Parts of the central U.S. this morning are preparing for more wintry weather from a deadly and powerful storm. Heavy snow on Monday and Tuesday buried parts of the Midwest. It caused accidents and created whiteout conditions in Minnesota, Nebraska, and the Dakotas. Some of the hardest hit areas saw close to a foot of snow.
Through the blistering cold, plows cleared the mounting snow off the streets of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. As more snow fell overnight, nearly a foot of it has blanketed the city since Monday. For days, this deadly storm has smacked the Midwest. It dumped record amounts of snow and created whiteout conditions that turned roads into a slick, slippery mess. In nearby Minnesota, at least 3 people have died in weather-related crashes this week. The weather is to blame for more than 500 accidents. We rode with Brian Foote as he plowed Interstate 90.
You might be driving on a really good road, and then suddenly come on a patch of ice and catch some slush or something. It's going to pull you into the ditch or into another vehicle or something.
Israeli security forces have shot dead a suspected Palestinian attacker near a settlement in the West Bank. A police spokesperson says the alleged assailant tried to stab a man at a busy intersection before he was shot by security forces. Officials say a bystander was also injured by a stray bullet. Around 100 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli troops during an ongoing wave of unrest. Nearly half the fatalities involved alleged attackers in stabbings, shootings, and car attacks aimed mostly at Israeli security forces. 19 Israelis have been killed and 1 U.S. citizen in the violence since October 1st.
Taking time away from the climate change summit, President Obama placed a single rose at a memorial honoring the 130 people killed in the November 13th Paris terrorist attacks. The president discussed defeating ISIS with world leaders in Paris, but fighting climate change topped the agenda. And the president called stopping global warming a powerful way to fight terrorism.
Nothing will deter us from building the future we want for our children. What greater rejection of those who would tear down our world than marshaling our best efforts to save it.
But critics say President Obama's efforts to save the world from climate change may actually destroy parts of the U.S. economy, particularly the coal-producing industry. And excessive federal regulations are already causing hurt and hardship for many Americans. Tighter rules on greenhouse gas emissions have increased unemployment and poverty in coal-producing states like West Virginia. Writing in the Wall Street Journal, one expert points out, in the past 3 years, 27 coal mining companies in Central Appalachia have filed for bankruptcy. And since 2009, 332 coal mines have shut down in West Virginia, costing close to 10,000 jobs. West Virginia's unemployment rate now stands at nearly 7%, about 2% higher than the national average. Environmental Protection Agency limits on power plant carbon dioxide emissions and other federal regulations have caused electric companies to close coal-fired plants. 1/3 of all plants nationwide are expected to shut down within the next 7 years.
Hundreds of dead fish have washed up on beaches in Perth South, and swimmers have reported skin breakouts. The cause is still a mystery, but experts say the quality of the water is likely to blame.
Dozens of fish floating dead in Cockburn Sound. It's the second time in the last 5 days, and there are still no definite answers as to why it's happening.
It's been unfortunate that with all the resources at the disposal of government in this day and age that they're unable to tell us what's going on out there, and that's really upsetting the community. And it's important that whoever's caused this, if it has been man-made, is held to account.
More fish were reported dead on the shores today, including snapper, blowfish and cuttlefish. But it's not just marine life. Health authorities confirming a number of swimmers have reported breaking out in rashes. Toxicology tests were performed on the dead fish last week, but the specimens weren't fresh enough for accurate results.
Police have shut down what authorities have called a suspected radical mosque east of Paris during a huge security operation. This is the third mosque closed since France declared a state of emergency after last month's terror attacks in Paris. The Interior Minister says 3 cultural centers linked to the mosque are also being dissolved. The closures are part of a huge crackdown after some 130 people were killed in the Paris attacks on November the 13th. French authorities have been accused of Islamophobia following the acts of terror. Many Muslim scholars strongly condemn the killings in Paris, saying Islam does not condone such atrocities.
Thousands gathered for a candlelight vigil for the victims of Wednesday's mass shooting. The medical examiner confirmed the names of those killed in the attack, ranging in age from 26 to 60. Michael Wetzel leaves behind a wife and 6 children.
They are very overwhelmed. There are 6 kids that have lost their father.
This woman lost her husband.
I actually got an extra hug and a kiss before he left, so I'm just holding on to that.
As stunned communities mourn the lives lost, more details have emerged about the suspects in the shooting. U.S.-born Muslim Syed Farook and his Pakistani-born wife Tashfeen Malik. Some in law enforcement are saying Farook had ties to terror suspects. CNN, quoting officials, said Farook had been in contact with known terror suspects overseas and had become radicalized after marrying Malik in Saudi Arabia last year. Another reason authorities believe the shooting may be terror-related, the arsenal of weapons found at the couple's home. 12 unexploded bombs, which may have been made based on an Al-Qaeda magazine, were discovered, along with thousands of rounds of ammunition.
They were equipped and they could have continued to do another attack.
One neighbor's wife had become suspicious.
She had noticed that they had, I guess, receiving packages, quite a few packages within a short amount of time, and that they were actually doing a lot of work out in the garage.
But some neighbors didn't want to report anything because they didn't want to be accused of profiling. Meanwhile, authorities say Farook traveled to Saudi Arabia at least twice in 2013 and 2014. And some have questioned whether or not his wife played a role in his radicalization.
Well, Syrian opposition sources have reported that Russian troops are expanding a military base in central Syria to use it as their second airbase in the country. A Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported major activities by Russian forces in the base. It said that adding fortifications and developing runways to Shayrat base can be indications that it will be used as an airbase to intensify airstrikes against ISIL. The base is located 40 kilometers from the city of Homs. Russia's been using the Syrian government's airbase for its airstrikes, which started more than 2 months ago. The strikes have mainly focused on northern areas of the country. A new base in Homs province could facilitate Russian airstrikes in central Syria.
British warplanes attacked ISIS targets in Syria just hours after Parliament gave its approval. 4 RAF Tornadoes took part in a bombing raid on ISIS-controlled oil fields. The House of Commons voted in favor of military action after a 10-hour debate. Activists gathered outside Parliament to protest the vote. Inside, Prime Minister David Cameron made his case for Britain's participation.
Last week, the whole international coalition had some 26 aircraft available. 8 of those were British Tornadoes. So typically, the UK actually represents between a quarter and a third of the international coalition's precision bombing capability.
Opponents said bombing ISIS won't make much difference, noting that American airstrikes haven't driven them out of the positions.
Local officials in East Afghanistan say the CIA continues to run a shadow war there by training counter-terror forces known as the Host Protection Force. The secretive paramilitary unit was set up by the U.S. intelligence agency to find the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Afghan officials, however, have accused the force of civilian killings, torture, arbitrary arrests, and the use of excessive force in night raids. Witness reports have revealed that American operatives were present during assaults where extreme force was used. KPF is said to be more influential than the Afghan army and police in host province and often acts outside normal chains of command. According to the Washington Post, the CIA is still directing KPF operations, paying fighters salaries and training and equipping them.
Terror at a nightclub in Cairo today, where attackers killed at least 16 people using firebombs. Egypt's state news agency says the attackers threw Molotov cocktails into the nightclub, burning the people trapped inside. Police suspect 2 young men carried out the attack. It's not clear what their motives were, but state officials suspect there was a dispute with nightclub staff.
Saudi warplanes continue targeting civilian areas in Yemen amid deteriorating humanitarian crises in the country. In the latest attack, the jets carried out 5 raids on various areas in the capital, Sana'a. They also targeted 2 farms in Hajjah province. No casualties are reported. Over 7,200 Yemenis, most of them women and children, have been killed in the airstrikes since March. The World Food Program has warned that the country is facing food insecurity at an emergency level.
The international forces ranged against ISIL have been growing week by week. Russia and the UK are the most recent to fight the militants in Syria and Iraq. But ISIL's influence has been growing in Africa too. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has long been calling for action.
I have huge borders with Libya, which only Egypt secures. There are weapons in the desert, and it is smuggled into Egypt. Terrorists infiltrate from Libya to attack positions inside Egypt. This continuously threatens Egypt's peace and stability, as well as the peace and stability in the region.
Egypt has been urging an international coalition against ISIL in Libya, and the likes of Italy has joined, but it's feared it won't be enough.
ISIL is expected to increase their operations in Libya after the pressure in Syria. The news we have is that ISIL in Libya are learning to use planes and could include the Air Force in their battle, which is a dangerous development. We, especially the Arabs, have always depended on the West to create a coalition to retain stability and rebuild Libya. This is completely wrong, and what is happening in Iraq is clear proof of their failure.
So, with airstrikes and intervention heating up in Syria and Iraq, chances are ISIL will focus more keenly on its African operations. But just what can the continent do about it?
The Arab and Arab League should intervene, and the Egyptian army should not be responsible alone. The region and our continent should move through the UN to retain stability in Libya by creating a united front to deal with ISIL before it grows further.
We all know the problems, and we see. But take Paris. If a few people had guns on their belt, on their shin, in their jacket, instead of being slaughtered, you might have lost some. You definitely would have lost the bad guys. But it wouldn't have been hundreds of people, with many more expected to die. They're in the hospital dying now. And then you go to the tragedy that we just had in California. Nobody has a gun except the bad guys, the scum, the scum. They're scum. And nobody has a gun. Nobody can protect themselves. They got lucky that they left. They left because they didn't want to die. You know, it's a whole big hoax. They want to die. They don't want to die. They talk about they want to die. They don't want to die. They're chicken shit, believe me. They don't want to die. No, they don't want to die.